Thank you and welcome, everybody. I'm quite excited to share with you this wonderful topic, change intelligence, how to master habit change. And today I would like to make it a little bit engaging on your side. So as you listen to what I'm going to share, hopefully you can think of one or two habits that you would like to change in your life. And just to share a little background, I've done a lot of self-development, like many of you. And I found myself at some point going from workshop to workshop, from training to training, only to realize that actually my daily life has not changed. My behavior triggers and coping strategies were still the same. And many courses, although I knew about what they were talking about, I knew the topics, I knew how it should be, but something prevented me from actually changing my life, changing my habits. And later on, when I became a psychologist myself, I was curious about what drives the change. How can we become intelligent? Generally, intelligence, Stephen Hawking said, is the ability to adapt to change. Also Charles Darwin, right? So the survival of the fittest, the survival of the people who can adapt to change. Most people don't change throughout their life. Maybe some want to change but don't know how. Others don't even consider this an option. And only a few curious ones, especially those who go from workshop to workshop and ask themselves, what does it take for me to change for better? And why am I living this pattern again and again? What drives my behavior? Why do I make this kind of choices? And how can I make better ones? So these are the questions that really drove my exploration. And I ended up with this topic and creating what I think now is application of some of the work that Virginia Satir started, that other therapists, but also philosophers touched upon. And now I work with organizations mainly in business world, but also non-for-profit organizations and people and their families who want to change for better. So how do we do that? Today, we will talk a little bit about neuroscience. It's an exciting area of psychology and science together. It's about neurons and how they're wired to create habits. We will look at the application of these scientific discoveries. We'll do some fun exercises. Hopefully you can do them so you're not driving or anything. So if you're at comfort of your home, I suggest you have a glass of water and you move away from distractions like gadgets, apart from seeing the screen with slides. I normally put my phone screen down because that is something that we're getting more and more distracted by. And of course, I would like us to plan a new habit or a habit change. How about that? So this workshop can be beneficial for you. Now, when we talk about change, let's just change something. For example, if you're wearing a watch, I advise and suggest you take this watch now and change and put it on the other hand. If you're wearing a ring, or if you're wearing your hair in a certain way, just try to change it. So to feel how it feels, to make that little change that is a habit. And if I asked you how it feels now, even now, I've done that many times, changing that watch, I still feel a little bit uncomfortable. I feel a little bit weird, a little bit strange, although my body wants to get back to that familiar status quo and put it on the right hand, or the one that I'm familiar with. And it's interesting that there is a pull like that. It's almost like a magnet that's built in our nervous system for good reasons. And it serves us very well to some extent, but at some point, these habits start running our life without us thinking about them. So many times when we start a certain thing, it's not familiar, it takes longer, it takes a bit of effort, like learning how to drive, for example. You need to look in the mirror, learn how to maneuver, take a wheel, put pedals, gas, all of that. Oh, but at some point, once we drive many, many hours, we can get from A to B without thinking about it, almost like in a trance. Now that is a habit. So if we look at the description of what habit is a settled or regular tendency or practice, either positive or negative, especially if it's hard to give up, one that is hard to give up. Now, what is change intelligence? When I thought about it, it's not just about being aware of what habit I want to change. It's ability, but also process to create a healthy habit and to maintain it, sort of manage that habit, which is very important long term, because if we can create enough healthy habits, we can outsource the life to these habits and focus on something that requires our immediate and urgent attention or important attention. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So this is the change intelligence, as I call it. So in the middle, CQ, that is the magic spot where we are aware, where we can create habits and we can manage them. So that's where we want to get to. Now, how do we get there? How do we become aware of our habits? Let's look at the neuroscience of habit change. Now, the difficult bit is that our body, let's say our brain, consists of three brains. It has a reptilian brain, the oldest part of our brain, at the back of our skull, sort of inside, next to the brain stem or the spine cord. It also is the brain that goes to the sort of the butt area. It goes along the spine and connects to all organs through the vagus nerve. Reptilian brain, for a reason why it's called reptilian, and we share it with our reptilian species, reptilian folks. It's responsible for instinct, for survival. So if we leave anything to a chance, our reptilian brain will take command, will take charge. Out of all three brains, it's the oldest. It's the most sort of ancient, but the most difficult to change, because it's so engraved in our behavior. Instincts can be very, very powerful. And actually, mostly, if we have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, for example, like children up until the age of 25, their reptilian brain mostly running the show. Now, there is a mammal brain, or paleomammalian, that is responsible for feelings and emotions. It's a relatively new part of our brain. I mean, it's still a very, very old part. It's in the middle, and it has that connection we call the limbic system to emotions and feelings. And in order for us to make a change, we need to tap into this part of the brain too, because it's much more powerful than the neomammalian brain, which is the youngest. We call it the human brain. That's responsible for the language, for concepts, for artistic visions, for ideas, for communication. It has the executive function, the prefrontal cortex. And that is sort of the one that we want to train. And it's like an elephant and a rider. This is the rider. It wants to change. It has a lot of knowledge and concepts, but I know how to change the habit. We need to tap into all three brains of ours. And how do we create a habit and maintain it That's more important. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we are wired as humans. We have two distinct networks, one that is dedicated to pain, one that's dedicated to reward. And naturally, we move away from pain towards reward or pleasure. And if we can if we can connect some of our habits to reward, we can also learn how to change them. But most of the time, our habits were useful at some point. It's only when they are so autonomous and so dysfunctional, they may be traveling through generation, what I call it, when our ancestors had these habits, these patterns, these traumatic reactions to events, and then they passed on these events, or we were born with this memory, and it's connected to some form of pain, and the network gets overloaded. So we run that again and again and again. We get stuck in that pain network, and we don't know how to switch from that pain to reward network. And that's why we're trying to move away from pain, but we don't know how. And there are many things that are, at play here, but mainly what happens when we're under stress and experiencing pain. If we look under the microscope, there are hormones called adrenaline and noradrenaline that get produced together with cortisol. Now, adrenaline and noradrenaline, they're responsible for contraction of blood vessels. They restrict the access of oxygen and glucose to that neocortex, the new part of our cortex. We start seeing sort of tunnel vision thinking. We don't accept new ideas, and we have blocked creativity. So actually, to be in a pain reaction and stressful situation chronically can weaken our immune system and reduce neurogenesis, which is the rejuvenation of our cells, neuron cells. Now, on the opposite, health and pleasure and reward release different kinds of hormones, namely dopamine and oxytocin. The release of dopamine is the feeling of like pleasure and motivation. It's a wonderful hormone. We experience it in many different circumstances, but a lot of it is produced when we experience good moods and pleasurable moments. Or a release of oxytocin. That's when we have the dilation of blood vessels and more oxygen and glucose get to neocortex. So actually, it's a very healthy thing. Now, how do we get to that pleasure, not the guilty pleasure of like sugar and drugs? Because this is also the extreme version of pleasure that people are trying to run away from pain into something that can soothe or mask this pain. So how do we create healthy pleasure circuits in our brain? Now, the good news is that we have this ability called neuroplasticity, and that is our ability to change and carve out new pathways in our brain with new thoughts and new skills developed. Through repetition and practice, we strengthen these pathways and we form new habits. Now, old pathways get used less and they get weaker and weaker, but we need all our power, willpower, and all our intention and motivation, because with repeated and direct attention towards a desired change, we all have the ability to rewire our brains physically and biologically. The structure of our brain can change and does change. We have a lot of interesting research done in the field of neuroscience. For example, there's a study done on London cab drivers and taxi drivers. In order for them to pass a test, they need to learn by heart all the roads in London. And there were some new students at the age of 64 and later. And when they learned all those maps, so the scientists, the researchers did the test before they started the training and afterwards. And what they discovered, that the area called hippocampus actually physically enlarged, increased in size after their training at a very late age. So that was a big discovery in the neuroscience, that a possibility for the brain to be plastic, to be changeable, to actually wire differently by having this strong pathway and changing the way we think, we feel, and we learn. And habits are just well-traveled pathways. Our brain finds these things easy to do. So that's good news for all of us, even if we're retired or closer, sort of at the other end of our life, not at the beginning, which is much easier to change, some say. We know it, right? So, but now what we know is something fantastic and inspiring, that we can change the way we are and the way our brains are at any time of our life. Now, of course, what does the future hold? We need to take that into consideration. Of course, we will have increased technological advancements and more changes at work and home because of the pandemic or a new changes in the way how we work. More demands on our brain will continue to drive that thirst, that hunger for immediate gratification and expectations. Expectations are high, especially in the Western world, with technology being available, with gadgets being available. But how is our poor brain adjusting to these changes? Well, not so well. Because of the overwhelm and because of those three different brains, the reptilian and mammal brains are not very good at adjusting. And we see that in our statistics. According to the World Health Organization, more than 120 million people suffer from depression, for example, and more than 52% worldwide have divorce rates in different countries. 48% report overeating or eating unhealthy foods to manage stress. And all this overwhelm and make 20% of Americans, for example, drinking alcohol to manage their stress, and 16% reported smoking. So people do manage stress, but unfortunately, many coping with this stress with unhealthy habits. So how do we change a habit? There's a simple circle. As you can see here, there's a reward. We want to connect it to the pleasure network in our brain. There is a cue that triggers a routine that then creates a reward. So that's how habits are created, very simply. If we want to change, for example, the routine, the way how we go about our day. We want to make sure we keep the cue of the established routine, and we reward ourselves after we do a new routine. So simply put, let me give you an example. In order for me to start doing an exercise, which I don't like generally, I find it hard to motivate myself to wake up earlier or do exercise in the evening when I'm tired. No way. And of course, I haven't been very successful at changing that habit of spending tons and tons of hours in front of my screen, working and eating, let's say, unhealthy food. So what helped me was to connect one of my established routines, for example, is brushing teeth. Every morning I go and brush my teeth, and morning is my better hour, better time of the day than evening. So I created a small routine with the same cue. When I go to the bathroom in the morning and I take a toothbrush, and when I brush my teeth, that I've chosen to be my cue to do 5 push-ups. Okay, so after I brush my teeth, I do 5 push-ups, and I reward myself by ticking that day with, okay, my activity is done. And by doing this every day, I have created something that my brain has processed as an achievement, although it's very simple, or you can do something that's simple for you, if 5 press-ups or sit-ups, or you can, for example, put next to your bed your running shoes. And as you wake up in the morning and you put your feet on the ground, oh, you see your running shoes, you slide your feet in them, and as you go downstairs, you already have started that new routine. So that's what we want to do, is to change a habit loop. And changing a habit loop, it takes a little bit of effort, but the most important thing, what we want, is to decide on a goal that you would like to achieve. So this goal can be something that is immediate or midterm or long term. But what we want to do is chunk it down so it becomes very measurable and very attainable, very achievable, and to have a simple action that will get you towards that goal, which you can do on a daily basis, okay, and link it to a reward. So if, for example, your goal is to I don't know, lose 5 kilos, then the simple action that will get you towards that goal is to do, for example, 15 minutes a day exercise in the morning or in the evening, connecting to the daily, let's say, routine that's already established, right? And link it to a reward. For example, if I do a full month, or better 2 months, because some researchers say we need 66 days in order to have the habit established. Some say 21, but what I've seen in practice of my clients, 21 days is a good cycle of 3 weeks required to break the old habit. So to stop it, in order for us to establish and log the new routine, the new habit, we need at least 66 days, like 2 months time, even a bit more. And some say, yeah, 10 weeks. So that would be fantastic, 2.5 months, 3 months. The longer we go with the habit, the more engraved it will be. So if we want to have a new healthy habit, let's aim for 3 months. And whatever we can achieve towards that goal, we can chunk it down to a simple action that we can do every single day. That's going to be simple, pleasant for the brain, because there's a reward associated. So, for example, if I achieve this, my first target, let's say of 66 days, then I'll go on a vacation, or then I will buy myself a little gift, or I go out, or something that your mind will keep as pleasant and motivating to do and have it as a goal. A goal as a reward goal, right? So we want to tap into that reward network in our brain that helps us seal that juicy kind of hormone called dopamine to be produced, so that we feel good and we can do it again and again and again. And it needs to be simple and also not too hard, because if most people struggle because they put very, very strong, big goals, big action plan, complicated, difficult to do. And of course, no wonder they don't stick to it, because it's just bloody hard to do something that is already stressful to live a life we live. And we just want to make something simpler, something easier, something pleasant, something joyful. That's what we're looking for. Then we need to plan when and where you will do your chosen action. So that needs to be specific. You need to choose a place where you're gonna do that exercise, or if you want to drink more water, you need to find when you're gonna be. For example, what I did at the beginning, I didn't drink enough water, and I realized that I was dehydrated. So I made myself a very interesting challenge to change a habit loop. Every time I noticed my breathing, I reached out to make a sip of water. Then when I had that created, the loop created, I added even more. Every time I noticed my breathing, I would have a little smile, so I could feel better and sip a glass of water. Then you can have a compound effect, like sort of a build-up. Once you have one routine established, then you can add a little more. Okay, once I notice my breathing, I sip some water. I make a little smile and I stretch. my body out. Okay. And that's how healthy habits then get created, because once I feel good and my endorphins are started flooding, then I feel, oh, actually, it's working. I remember water. I've connected it to something pleasant, smiling, feeling good, healthy, positive thoughts, stretching, and yeah, just feeling good about remembering and achieving that little goal. Now, fourth point on this change your habit loop, as you can see, every time you encounter that time and place, do the action. So for example, every time I go to brush my teeth, afterward I do 5 push-ups, even not just in the morning, but in the evening, or if I brush 3 times a day, I start doing it. So the habit needs to be together with the cue. And when there's a cue, there's also like a Pavlovian reflection, sort of reflex. Then it's like a cue, a routine, and then a reward. So it could be like a reward could be a little happy dance, or a lot of smiles and hugs when you feel good. And continue for this habit loop for 10 weeks and see how that little one change changes the whole life of yours. Because if we change only 2 millimeters now, at the beginning of our flight, let's say, the trajectory of our plane, by the end of our journey, because we took a slightly little a change in direction, we will get to a completely different destination. So as we live our life 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years from now, that little seed of healthy habit might give us more years of our life, more healthy, happy years of our life. And that's what motivates me when I make a change of a habit. It's not now that I'm thinking about. Of course, now it may be not comfortable, not so pleasant, not so rewarding. But if I start thinking about 30 years from now, what this little habit will give me, and I use my self-motivation to imagine myself being healthier, having that ability to travel, having my body in a better state so I can actually have a more thriving life, have better quality of relationship, have better quality of life, living longer, healthier. And that whole longevity piece for me is very motivating. So recently I started a new change loop by having a swimming coach and a running coach and a nutritionist. And of course, this also helps. So having a social support system, doing this habit change together with a buddy or together with a friend, together with somebody, together with the team, when there's a responsibility and accountability and other people, social pressure, peer pressure is great for habit creation. So once we know, because we're social animals, once we know that there's somebody else together with me in the same pack, in the same team, and we're doing this not just for ourselves, but for them as well as for our children or grandchildren, we're showing them this new role model, new behavior, that I can actually make a change in my own habit. And by sharing that and claiming that, owning it, and announcing it, literally, when we make a change or wanting to make change, if we announce it to the world, there's an interesting pool, because then we feel a shame associated with what if we don't do it. Yeah. So we want to feel good. Remember the pleasure and reward network. We want to move towards pleasure, and we move towards pleasure when we feel good about ourselves, when others see us in a good light. So having that accountability body, announcing and proclaiming to the world on social media or to your friends, family, whoever can keep you accountable, is a really good thing that you can add to the repertoire, to this change of habit loop practice. So let's put this together. And I would like to spend some time actually going case study by case study and look at these examples of habits that you want to change. And the most easy mistake, I would say, the most common mistake that I see people make is either making their goal too big and then feeling scared the following day and not starting. So the beauty and the art is to start today. And then to keep it up, making sure, just print that habit change loop from the presentation, write it down, put it on a post note, put it in front of you. So wherever you decided to make that change happen, the place and the time, schedule it in your calendar, put it in a place where you're going to do it, and make sure you do it every day, starting from today or tomorrow morning. But today is better because tomorrow morning your unconsciousness then kicks in, and then that whole sleep changes the way who you are. In the morning we're a different person. Every day we're a different person. The mood changes, the hormones change depending on how you sleep, depending on what you eat, etc. So the earlier you make this change, the better you will feel, because you will feel, oh, I've done that. And there's another study done. So once we invest in the start, once we start the ball rolling and make a first step, it's going to be much easier to put the whole puzzle together. Once you just make a little healthy click of a puzzle, like 2-3 pieces together, you will feel like, oh, I've already invested here. Why don't I just make a little more here, a little more here, a little more here? And you will be surprised how little steps, those 2-millimeter steps towards a different direction, can change the landscapes, can change this whole territory and the map of your reality, the territory. The whole puzzle will be different. So I invite you to make that little experiment, to experience and have a good team with you. If you have a team that you're part of at work, if you have a really good relationship with your family, if you have some friends, if you have any buddies, just invite them to do something healthy together, or just tell them, look, just been to this workshop and I've decided to change this bloody habit. Can you keep me accountable? Can you just check in with me tomorrow if I've done this? I've decided to make this change at whatever, 9 o'clock or 10:30 after I did this. And you connect, remember, that change to an established routine. For example, at 12 o'clock when I have lunch, or whenever I go to that canteen, instead of taking a unhealthy meal, I would choose a healthy one. And I want to do this as of tomorrow. And see how it goes with your body, with your team, with your family member or friend helping you. Now, if you have any questions, find me on either Instagram at the.family.psychologist, or write to me at info@daryahaitoglou.com. Here's how my surname is spelled. It's great. Darya, that's my name, Darya. My surname is Haitoglou.com. So this is a short but informative, hopefully, presentation for you to make that habit change. And remember, if you want to just make a little picture of this slide, to remember what are the 5 steps to change a habit loop. Decide on a goal that you would like to make or to achieve. Choose a simple action, number 2, that will get you towards your goal, which you can do on a daily basis, link it to a reward. 3, plan when and where you will do your chosen action. 4, every time you encounter that time and place, do the action. And 5, continue for 10 weeks. So that is something that I invite you to do now. Let me quickly check. Do you still have your watch or ring on the other side, on the other hand, or not? Have you kept it, or have you switched it back? Now, if you kept it, well done. This is how we want to keep on going with our habits. We want to keep these new habits, but that could be also a trigger or a cue for you tomorrow when you wake up and you see your ring or your watch on the other hand, and you remember that workshop that you did the previous day about habit change. And that hopefully will cue you to do your new habit. Now, if you've swapped and switched back, I invite you to try again. You know, the difference between success and failure is just an extra stand up. So imagine, you know, a person goes, and then falls into a puddle, and then stands up again, falls again, stands up again, falls again. Most people, when they fall and they get tired and they stay flat because they feel like a failure. The difference between that and success is just one extra stand up. So one extra trial. And I invite you to just try again, to put that watch on the other hand and see what happens. How long can you keep it? That is a question I would like to ask. How long can you keep this new habit? So thank you very much for your time, for your presence. And I look forward to hearing from you how your new habits are created, maintained, and what else could you build as a new habit once you build your first one, the first new habit. Thank you.